Hi and welcome back to the GemHawks YouTube channel. Thank you so much for continuing to support me and joining me here on YouTube and over on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter. Just a very brief word to let you know that usually on Monday evenings at 8 PM I do a Facebook Live over on GemHawks and Gems Gembox, and that's sometimes for a bit of chatter, sometimes to bring you metaphysical items, crystals and the such that are available to buy on the night, and I can explain that all to you if you would care to join me. That's 8 PM Greenwich Mean Time or British Summer Time on a Monday evening most weeks. So what we're doing today is we're continuing on from our Loopy cab setting technique. Now in the first section I showed you how to create a cab frame, how to create a segment of looped 0.8mm gauge wire and how to put the two pieces together so that you have a piece like this, which can be used in a number of different ways. In the video today, which I'm going to show you up next, is a way that we can finish a cabochon supported within the loopy cab frame, like so. And I have another one of these beautiful carved cabs to show you how this will all come together. The piece that I'm working on today is a piece of rose quartz that has been carved with that Horus eye or Ra eye, and here's a frame very similar to the one that we made in the first video. As I mentioned before, there are a number of different ways that you can take this forwards, but for today I'm going to show you how to just sit the cabochon in utilising a single stretch of wire. Now this can be done with 0.8mm gauge or 0.6mm gauge. The 0.6 is much more pliable and therefore easier to kind of make do the things you want it to do, but it has slightly less residual strength. If you use more passes of wire over the back and the face of the cabochon with your 0.6mm gauge, you won't have any problems with it coming loose. You just need to be sure that it is in there securely. With the 0.8mm gauge wire over the surface and over the rear of the cabochon, you can use fewer passes of wire. So the choice is entirely yours. Obviously there is an aesthetic value to it, the 0.6 being just that little bit narrower, and therefore it impacts less on the face of the gemstone. So if we come back down here, you can see that I've got some large loops that have already been pre-wound onto the frame that we made, and this sized frame has been made to fit approximately the cabochon that we're looking at today. What I did was I put these two pieces together utilising some 0.4mm gauge wire, and I gizmoed all the way up to the shoulder bend on the one side, but on the other side I had a residue of wire available. And what this means, I can use it in one seamless long length of wire to create some zigzag or basket weave to sit up towards an elongated neck and bail design. If you don't have enough wire left over, don't worry, you can soon add on some more simply by rolling around the frame wire at least 4 or 5 times with a new length of your 0.4mm gauge wire. So what we're going to do first of all is show you how to create the neck and bail, and then we will learn how to set the cabochon. And the reason I'm doing this in what might be considered a reverse order is it is much easier to hold the piece once you have created the neck and the bail up at the top. So I'm going to show you that first, but what you do need to be aware of is that your cab will then still be able to sit inside the frame. So be at great pains to take a look at the size and notice if you have gaps between these uprights at the top of the cabochon in the 12 o'clock position, you need to maintain at least that space. If you draw those together, you then won't be able to fit your cabochon nicely and neatly inside the frame. So the first thing that I'm going to do is just fill this space by coiling around the shoulder of the design with this 0.4mm gauge gold colour wire. So I've just continued gizmoing along here, and I need to ensure that the space that we talked about a moment ago, that still remains. So what I'm going to do is draw the fine wire over to bridge that gap. Make sure that the gap remains in position. My fine wire is underneath on this side, so I want it to be over the top on the other side. So I'm just going to draw that over, and for the time being I'm just going to hold it slightly above where it will finish up when I'm completed this manoeuvre, and that's just so that I can get a really good grip on it and take the tail all the way around once and twice, 3 times and a 4th time. Coming back up the centre, I'm then going to wrap it 4 times around the other side, and I'll show you that. Once, twice, 3 times and 4 times. Through the magic of my wonderful husband's editing skills, I'm just going to take a pause for a moment and finish doing that exact same thing back and forth, winding 4 times on either side until I have enough of that neck section covered, and then I will show you how to finish that off. Through the virtue of those editing skills, I have managed to do a little bit of back and forth or basket figure of 8 weave up the neck of our design. So if you pop down with me, I'll show you what I've done. Just gone either side, 4 weaves, 4 weaves, 4 weaves, and then every time I've done a section of 4, I've just pulled those coils, pushed them down into position. So I've decided that this is going to be the last cut here. This is enough wire for me to be happy with. So I'm just going to make sure that I trim away in a position where it won't impact the design. Just dropped my wire on the floor there. So as ever, I'm just going to take the last little bit of wire and scooch that around and make sure it sits neatly. So what we have is a frame which will support our cabochon within. There's a little bit of airspace around, that's absolutely fine. It in fact makes our life slightly easier if you do have a tiny bit of a gap. And the next thing that we're going to do is turn both of these uprights forwards towards us at 90 degrees. Now the best tool that you can use for this particular piece of the design are flat facing pliers, and we need to assess if we're happy with the position of everything. I'm just going to pull that up ever so slightly. I'm going to pop my pliers into position so that they're completely level. If I imagine that this is the top of my design, which it is, it's where the cabochon will sit. I want that to be completely parallel before I push both of these wires forwards, and I'll do that slightly elevated so you can see that those have come forwards. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is trim away to around about sort of 4 or 5 inches or so that these 2 wires at the top are exactly the same length. I'm just going to support these tails and pop them in a rubbish bin out of the way. Next, I'm going to add a coil outwards on either of those posts, or both of those posts rather. So I'm just going to start the coil off, gripping at the tip of the wire with the tip of the pliers. This side is going to go outwards. This is 1mm wire, which has seen a little bit of working now, so it's getting a little bit tense. I'm going to start the coil off, flatten that down, and get it so that it's around about 2 coils worth, and then I'm just going to leave it until I decide how much I want to use. Flipping the design over makes it easier for me. I'm right-handed, so it's easier for me to use the pliers in my dominant hand, and then just little by little turn that coil until you get started. Switch to some flat-facing pliers, either chain nose, bent chain nose, or those flat pliers that we were using a moment ago, and get those to sit side by side so they're in approximately the same position. Now for the next section of making what I refer to as the Loopy bail, you can either use bail making pliers or you can use a round form such as a pen. It is entirely up to you. If you use the bail makers, you're able to grip the design within a pair of pliers and make quite a nice taut coil. If you are going to do it by hand around a round form, it does work just as well, but it just means that you have to put the tension in by hand, so it's entirely up to you. I'm going to use a set of step bail makers with a vinyl coating on the opposite peg or tine. So what you need to do is start coiling away, and I tend to start about 1 inch to 1.25 inches away from the coil I've created at the top. And I'm turning that away from me, and the key here is to keep those wires as close together as possible. When they turn back round, you'll need to withdraw the pliers, pop them back in and do that again. And now it becomes obvious why I left that tail of wire out, because you never can tell quite how far down you're going to need to bring that coil. So just fiddle with that until it sits in position. That's not entirely straight, so I can put my bail makers back in and just straighten that up and bring the coil up and above. I can then take my flat facing pliers and just draw that down a little bit towards the design at the base there. So I probably leave that sitting up a little bit. I just need to replicate now on the other side, so I can by eye gauge a little bit, because it's easier in fact to turn your coil when it's not already been created into a bale. So I'm just going to turn that a little bit before I flip the design over and start coiling back in the opposite direction, like so, and just keeping that tension as you go to try and get a nice even design. What you can then do is put your bale makers into position so that it's on both sides and draw the coil up. It does get a little bit tense at that stage, but you can draw the design out, and if you need to bring the coil down a little bit, just support that bale at the top. So that is how you create the Loopy bale, which you can, if you prefer, open out slightly. It looks very, very attractive, and you can just sit that exactly how you want it to sit. It's a pretty bale. It would catch if you were wearing lots and lots of other things around the neck, but it is really, really beautiful. And if you don't want to use that, you can simply sort of trim off and put a tiny, tiny coil on instead. So that's the main frame, neck and bale of the design. What I'm going to show you next is how to sit the cabochon really easily with a single strand of wire. Now, in the piece that I've created that is already on the board, which I'll just pop up for you now, this is using some 0.8mm gauge rose gold collar wire over the face and the back of the gemstone. I'm going to demonstrate for you now in 0.6mm gauge, and at the end of this video I'll put the two side by side and you can look and see the aesthetic differences. Now, the 0.6mm gauge in this kind of style of setting is really easy to work with. So if we pop back down to the board, I'm going to pop the cabochon into position. I've got prepared a section of 0.6mm gauge, and this is in a soft gold colour. And I'm going to start around about halfway along, very, very gently warming it. If you warm it too much, you will work hard on it, and it then won't be as supple for you when you're trying to use it in more intricate coils. So if I just pop the gemstone down for a moment, I'm going to press down on the finer wire. This is 0.6mm gauge, and it's sitting over the top of my design at the moment. I'm just going to put a hard bend around the frame, bring it back to another point. At this stage I haven't decided exactly how I want my design to work, but I'm going to bring another angle up. This means that it's just a little bit easier for me to work with. I can put it down on the board, pop my design into position and take it from here how I want the design to start looking. Now, I don't want to cover too much of the carving up, but obviously you can be working with a gemstone that has no carving on and is quite similar all the way over. So the first thing I'm going to do is just get this set into position, sitting the cab flush inside the frame and just using the heat of my hand to draw a little arc on that section of wire and then a sharp bend with the 0.6mm up the back and out of the way. So you can see already that it's starting to get some grip on the design. What I might do with this one, just make sure that the cab sits exactly where you want it to and it doesn't go too far below or above the line. I want it to sit perfectly flush. I'm just going to take this wire side now. Again, a little bit of heat helps that to work for you. I've got a section of wire coming across the back now, and I think I want it to come up in the same position here. You'll notice from my first example that having two wires starting at the bottom through the same gap and finishing a gap apart at the top is quite an attractive aesthetic, so I think I will repeat that and bring that up over the top, one gap apart at the top, and just put a little bit of a curvature in before I bring that back down on the other side. So you don't have to be symmetrical and you don't have to follow any design rules with this. I think I'm going to come over the top, bend that down but quite close to where the loop is, little bit of heat, and have this crossing over so it's one below on the other side, firm bend across the back. And I think I'm going to be a rebel and I'm going to put a third pass of wire up on this side. So up it pops. I'm going to try and snuggle it to the right if I can. A little bit of a curve through the loop and then back across the back. Now this is already feeling pretty secure, but because At this stage I'm working with 0.6mm gauge. If I was making this to sell, I would want to be sure that that cab isn't going to go anywhere during wear or activity. So I'm going to continue to put another few passes over before I bring it to a conclusion. So back down to the board, I'm going to repeat what I said earlier. I like the idea of having multiple threads coming up through the same loop gap. So I'm going to bring the wire up here, little bit of warmth and curvature, and take it over a bit like a rainbow to that side, and then up across to the top. And I'm just going to be quite random now and just bring one over, little bit of a loop, and I don't like how that's looking, so I'm just going to warm it and bring that down the back again. And you can see that you can be a little bit more symmetrical if you want to, or you can take symmetrical hints from it. And if I show you the back now, so I'll just hold that in position, that's feeling quite safe really. You can see that from the back this is going to go nowhere. So all we really need to do now is find out where these tail ends are going to go. There are two ways that you can finish on the back. You can either take the tail of your wire to a section of framework and wrap around a couple of times before trimming, or you can take it to another pass of wire on the back of the gemstone. I'm going to show you both techniques, but you need to choose which one you think looks better. In a single design, I would always finish the ends of the wire in the same way. I'm only showing you two different options now so that you have options open to you. So back down to the board, the first piece of wire I'm going to finish off by wrapping it around the frame. I just need to make sure that I'm happy with where that's sitting on the front. I want that to sit just so. Bring it back into position, take it down to the bottom and look for a free piece of framework and just post the end through like so. It might be a little bit tense, but you'll get it through. A little bit of perseverance, pull that tail around and wrap it over. Now I would be inclined to go for a second coil. If you can get it through the same gap, ideally, that will be what you will want to do. So just move that over until you can fit it through, draw the tail around, and what you'll see is that moves really fluidly because we're working with a 0.6mm gauge. Trim the correct piece of wire, so place your pliers, or your cutters rather, first. Make sure that it is the correct wire you're cutting before you do that final snip, and then give that a squeeze and hide the end away. I'm going to show you the alternative finishing technique now, and that is to take the end of the wire to one of these passes of other gold colour 0.6mm gauge. So I'm going to pass it across the back of the gemstone, you can lift that slightly, and draw it through and around until it coils, and it's as if you're gizmoing around a piece of wire that's slightly heavier. Just support it with your non-dominant hand, pull that into position, trim the wire away, give that a little bit, maybe 2mm past the top of the wire, and that gives you an opportunity to take that end and tuck it away. Now what I will say when you're finishing with wire like this, if you're finishing with coils of wire on the back of a gemstone, there are certain people who will find that irritating. For me, I don't find it irritating, I find it perfectly comfortable, but many people will prefer to have it finished on the framework, and then you don't have almost like a little sticky outy bit. It's not a sharp bit, but it's a sticky outy bit, which doesn't work for everyone. So if you look at the front of the design, these are made with the very same technique. This is with 0.8 over the face, and this is with 0.6 over the face. They're both attractive. They are obviously different, and that is your part 2 of Loopy cab frame demonstration tutorial. I'm hoping to come up with a number of ways in which you can finish this design, so hopefully come back and visit me again soon and we'll get some more ideas out there for you. Lots and lots of love. Have a beautiful day, whatever you're doing and wherever you are. Take care. See you soon.